Well, good evening and welcome. Thank you for coming out on a brisk winter night. I'm Linda Joyce. I'm the president of the World Wisdoms Project Board, and this is our second event of this year, of the 2018-2019 program year. I want to thank all of you who are attending tonight, and I want to thank the donors who have contributed to the work of World Wisdoms Project. We're an independent 501c3, a nonprofit organization, and we definitely rely on your contributions, so thank you very much. I'd also like to shout out to tonight's co-sponsors, Trinity Lutheran for hosting us in their marvelous sanctuary, and St. Paul's for providing free childcare, and to the volunteers, Mark, our videographer in the back, and David Cloyd, our photographer, and Tammy, who's watching over childcare right now. So, if you're new to World Wisdoms, all of the board members have these name tags on. You can ask them any question. They should be able to answer it. And we also have a website, worldwisdomsproject.org, and that will provide lots of information as well. And we also are on Facebook. I'm excited to announce that we will have our first Joachim Viens annual memorial lecture this year. The speaker will be Dr. Winifred Sullivan. She has a law degree and is a professor of religious studies at Indiana University. What intrigued us to invite her is that her recent publication is titled A Ministry of Presence, Chaplaincy, Spiritual Care, and the Law. She describes chaplains as where theology meets the road. Where theological rubber meets the road. I blew that. I thought it was very clever. So she describes chaplains as where theological rubber meets the road. Bruce, the program chair, and I had a wonderful conversation with her. The lecture will be April 9th, so save the date. And then, as our Jim Reed, our board member, has observed, each and every individual on the planet is a storyteller and lives out those narratives in daily life. So this year, our program theme focuses on opportunities to share stories, particularly as they help us to understand the similarities and differences in our spiritual journeys. We are convinced that stories, especially personal ones, are powerful ways to reach a deeper understandings of the backgrounds and beliefs of our neighbors. All our speakers are from Northern Colorado this year. Stories also lead us to common ground and shared truths in a time of deep social division. I'd like to invite Bill Nealon, who is our vice president, to introduce tonight's speaker and describe the agenda.
Welcome. Good to see many of you back from last time. I hope you enjoyed Tink Tinker, the American Indian. Tonight, we get to do pilgrimages in the Jewish and Christian traditions. And Kabir, an Indian spiritual leader from the country of India, said, I felt the need of a great pilgrimages, so I sat still for 3 days. So that's one option, and tonight you're going to hear some other options, okay? Where does the spiritual journey lead? Is it just an outward journey, or is there also an inward exploration? The format tonight is we have 2 speakers, and each speaker is going to speak for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer period for about 15 minutes. And then we'll go into the second speaker and the same thing, and then at the end, we'll kind of do a wrap-up with them, kind of a compare and contrast with them each kind of doing their final talk, okay? So first, our speaker in the Jewish tradition is Rabbi Hillel Kazar, has served Jewish communities in Iowa, Maine, Colorado since 2001. After living in Israel for 9 years, he practiced law for 15 years before becoming a rabbi. What a trip. From law to a rabbi. His passion is working through teaching and community involvement to bring people together across religious and other lines that often separate us. He currently lives in Fort Collins. The other thing you need to know about the rabbi is that every Tuesday at 6:30 on KRFC FM 88.9. He does a program called Faith in Progress. And last week he interviewed our second speaker tonight, and then prior to our first speaker, he had interviewed Tink as well. And he has other religious people that he has each week on Tuesdays, so you may want to enjoy. So I welcome our dear rabbi, who's a member of our board as well, which is outstanding as well. So welcome.
Good evening. Is this on? Everybody can hear me? Okay. I'm actually used to working without a microphone, so I promised the sound people I wouldn't project as much as I usually do because it might break something. So I'll try to speak quietly as long as you can hear me. It's good to see everyone out this evening. Does that picture look familiar to anyone? Have any of you been there? How many of you have been there? Very nice. For those of you who don't know, that's a picture of what's called the Western Wall in Jerusalem. Just to set the place for you, on your handout you've got a sheet with 4 different maps. And I'd like you to look specifically at the lower right-hand map, the one that says Jerusalem just under it. The rough sort of cockeyed square that you see is what's called there the Old City. It's within a wall that's about 400 years old, and up to, maybe 150 years ago, everything that was called Jerusalem was within that wall. Everything that's outside the wall now is in the last 100 to 150 years, and of course it's become a much bigger city. That wall is called by some a Wailing Wall. We in the Jewish world don't particularly like that name. We call it the Western Wall because it was part of the compound that in biblical times held the Holy Temple that was the center of the Jewish world. If you look in the lower right-hand corner of that cockeyed square that I told you is the Old City, you'll see a smaller area, and there's a red circle right in the middle of it, and a red area below that. That rectangle, roughly, is considered by Jews to be the holiest place in the world because that's where the temple stood in biblical times. It is also considered by Muslims to be the 3rd holiest place in the world after Mecca and Medina that are now in Saudi Arabia. The red circle in the middle of that space is called the Dome of the Rock. It's a mosque. And the red area below that, the irregular sort of red area, that's the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Both absolutely stunning buildings, beautiful prayer spaces that are used by Muslims. That whole area where the 2 mosques are, where the temple stood in biblical times, Muslims call that the Noble Sanctuary. Jews refer to it as the Temple Mount. And as I said, Jews consider it to be a holy site. Orthodox Jews are told by their rabbis that they shouldn't go into that space, that whole big compound where the mosques are, because they might accidentally stumble on the site where the Holy of Holies was. And only the high priest, when the temple stood, and only on one day of the year, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, could go into the Holy of Holies. Now, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is, just to the left of that, there's very tiny writing that I think says the Western Wall. I can't read it. parentheses, Wailing Wall. The name Wailing Wall was actually invented by Arabs, apparently in about the 19th century, because they would see Jews coming there not just to pray, but to weep for the destruction of the temple. So that wall, if I can get the aim here, this wall, which we call the Western Wall, was not a part of the temple itself. It was part of the retaining wall around the temple compound. But it's all that's left above ground from the temple site. And so that is now considered in the Jewish world to be the holiest place where all Jews can go to pray. And there is a midrash, a legend, that if you take a little piece of paper and write a prayer on it and you stick it between the bricks in the wall, it's got a shorter route to heaven than your other average prayer. In biblical times, Jews were commanded, according to the Torah, the Hebrew Bible, to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, to the temple, 3 times a year. On Passover, on a holiday we call Shavuot in the early summer, which is at least on the calendar, the origin of Pentecost, and the holiday of Sukkot in the fall, sometimes referred to as the Festival of Booths or the Festival of Tabernacles. We still celebrate all of those holidays, but when the temple was destroyed by the Romans in the 1st century of the Common Era, the requirement to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year was wiped off the slate. There was nowhere to go because it wasn't to Jerusalem, it was to the temple. And according to the Torah, the temple can only stand in one place in the world. And it's that Temple Mount that's behind the wall. You can see the golden dome that is the Dome of the Rock. That's that red circle in the middle of the Temple Mount. And if you can see it from here, I can't really, but over here somewhere is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is more used for daily prayer than the Dome of the Rock. It could fit a lot more people in it. And on Fridays, which is the special day of prayer for Muslims, they crowd quite a few people into that big open space in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So even though there's no more requirement for Jews to make a pilgrimage, many Jews still do. But the pilgrimage is now, instead of to the temple, it's to the wall. The first time I was there was in June of 1972. I just gave away my age, more or less. And I remember coming into that square. Now, I should preface by saying I didn't grow up as a religious Jew. I grew up as what might be called a cultural Jew. We were not members of a synagogue. I did not have a bar mitzvah at 13. I didn't go to religious school, to Hebrew school. And somehow, in my early 20s, I found myself living in Israel. I still to this day wonder how that happened. I'm beginning to think in my advanced years that maybe I had a little bit of a nudge from some unidentified source, but we can guess. So somehow in June of 1972, on the holiday of Shavuot, in June, early summer, I found myself sitting towards the back of this big square. And you'll notice, if you can see from this distance, it's not a real great picture. There's a little bit of a dividing fence right here. And between that place and the wall is the actual prayer space. that is operated by the chief rabbinate in Israel as an Orthodox synagogue. And because it's an Orthodox synagogue, they have to have a divider so that men and women are in separate sections, which is what you'd see if you went into an Orthodox synagogue. You also might notice how much larger the men's section is. You get just as many women coming to the wall. Some days maybe even more than the men. And actually, over the years that I have been going to the wall since 1972, that divider between the men's and women's section has been steadily moving rightward, making the men's section bigger and the women's section smaller. June of 1972, my first time there, it was the holiday of Shavuot, actually the eve of the holiday. All Jewish holidays begin at sundown of the night before. And this square was absolutely packed with students from yeshivas, from rabbinic schools, all men, most of them wearing the very distinctive garb of Orthodox Jews, of black suits and white shirts and the little fringes sticking out from their belts, and black hats, dancing. They're dancing in circles all through that square, bumping into each other. It didn't matter. They're celebrating the holiday. They have made a pilgrimage, even if it was only from 100 yards away from where their school was. They were making a pilgrimage to the wall, to this spot. And I was awestruck. I was not yet fluent in the Jewish religion from a religious point of view, but I was so impressed both with the joy that these rabbinic students were showing, the sense of coming to a holy place, but also at the time, and some years ago, this became no longer the case, I'm not sure why, but across the back of the square, at that time, I remember very distinctly, there were 12 flagpoles. Each one had an Israeli flag, 12 representing the 12 tribes of Israel from the Bible. And I remember sitting there and looking from the wall to the flags, back to the wall, back to the flag, back and forth for maybe an hour. Seeing in between all of the history from the time that the Western Wall was first built until that day. It had all come back together. So to me at the time, it was not only a religious pilgrimage, it was a historical pilgrimage. This was the history of my people. The religious aspect at that time didn't mean very much to me. Since June of 1972, I have been there many times. And my attitude about it has changed. My view of that space and of the wall has evolved. I was there, must be close to 10 years ago. I remember I had just had some surgery, and my brother, who has lived in Israel for about the last 40 years, had wanted us to come for a particular thing. He was being honored with an honorary doctorate at a school in Jerusalem, and he wanted the family there. So we went, and I still wasn't very strong after the surgery. And I remember it was a warm day, but I felt chilled, and I remember sitting there wrapped in a coat and looking at the wall and looking at the people praying there. And now, at that point I had been a rabbi for a number of years. I was much more fluent in the religious aspect of Judaism. And I would have expected to feel something much stronger coming to that space in a religious sense. And I looked at the people praying at the wall. And I thought, praying to a wall. One of the recurring messages in the Hebrew Bible, particularly in all the books of the prophets, but it starts in the Torah in the first 5 books, with Moses certainly in Deuteronomy, and carrying on from there through all the rest of the Hebrew Bible, is don't pray to idols. God, in the Jewish tradition, has no physical form. One of the 10 Commandments, of course, says, you shall not make any kind of image of God. It actually also says don't make images of human beings or animals or birds or fish, but we've kind of forgotten that part of it. The Muslims have something very similar in the Quran, and they take that very seriously. And so when you go to a mosque, you won't see pictures of people. You won't even see pictures of animals. Islamic art is primarily Arabic calligraphy. So there's no danger there of praying to calligraphy, right? They don't have that problem. But that day I sat and I looked at the wall, and I looked at the space, and I felt not that I had come on a pilgrimage to a holy spot, to a holy site, but that I was watching people putting a wall in place of God. Now, they may have thought of it as just praying to God in a particular place. But one of the things that's happened with that wall over the last few years is it has become a symbol of breakdown in communication between different parts of the Jewish world. It has become, in and of itself, something that is important, something to fight over. And what I'm seeing in the last few years in that space, it's not only a place for Jews and Muslims to argue, and it is, because, as I mentioned, that space, where's the dot? There it is. That space up here behind the wall, which is actually physically higher than this area, where the mosques are, that is in control of a committee of Muslim clerics as a religious site. The wall is in the control of Jewish clerics, of rabbis. And underneath all of it, the Israeli Antiquities Authority is digging. It's an archaeological dig. And every time the Israeli Antiquities Authority allows a dig under the wall, the Muslims get very upset. They think that the Jews are trying to undermine the mosques so that the mosques will collapse so that the Jews can build the third temple. Now, I don't think that's the reason that it's happening, that the digs are happening. Although there is a small group in Jerusalem of Orthodox Jews who have gone beyond praying for the rebuilding of the temple, which is something Orthodox Jews have been doing for 2,000 years. They are actually preparing for the rebuilding of the temple. And so the Muslim concern is not entirely unwarranted. But within the Jewish world, I mentioned as I showed this to you, it is this area, the prayer area, is operated as if it were an Orthodox synagogue by the chief rabbinate, which means men and women cannot pray in the same space. And there are other regulations. Any man who's entering the men's side has to cover their heads. And I love it. They have giveaway cardboard skull caps. Although they'd like you to return it, but I'm sure many of them walk away. But they're cardboard, so it's cheaper, I suppose. And any woman entering the women's side has to have long sleeves and a long skirt, not pants. Women don't wear pants. That's men's garb. And so even if you're wearing pants, they will give you a big piece of cloth, like a big shawl, that you need to put around you like a skirt. So it's run as an Orthodox synagogue. Most American Jews are not Orthodox. We call them conservative or reform or reconstructionist, or sometimes, like the synagogue over here on Drake, Har Shalom, unaffiliated, but not Orthodox. Men and women pray together. There's no dress code. And in an Orthodox synagogue, women can pray, but they have to pray silently. The Talmud has a warning for men against hearing a woman's voice praying. Might be too seductive. Might distract the man who's the one who's supposed to be doing the praying from his prayer. Starting about 25 years ago, a group of women in Jerusalem formed themselves into a group called the Women of the Wall. And every month on the new moon, which is the beginning of a lunar month on the Hebrew calendar, they have come to the wall, they've gone into the women's section, and oh my God, they've prayed out loud. And starting a few years ago, they actually bring a scroll of the Torah. Now, some Orthodox rabbis say that a woman should never touch a Torah scroll because she might render it unpure, unclean, if it's that time of the month. And every time the women of the wall pray out loud and or bring their Torah scroll in there, the men on the other side of the divider fence throw things at them and scream at them and yell at them to drown out their voices. And it's not only the men on the other side, some of the women, some of the Orthodox women on the women's side do the same thing to the women who are trying to pray there, to do nothing more than be religious Jews. A few years ago, this dispute got so serious, and the Women of the Wall have always had support from the American Jewish community, men and women, organized movements of American synagogues have supported them. And it got so bad that there was a negotiation entered into involving the government of Israel, the chief rabbinate, the Women of the Wall, and the American Jewish community. What do we do about this? So you can't see it on the picture, but over to the right, behind this is a walkway that goes up to where the mosques are. But over behind that, it would be over here somewhere, there's a piece of that same retaining wall that really hasn't been used for anything. It's just an archaeological thing for people to see. So the negotiation came down to, okay, we'll make a third section. And it'll be an egalitarian section. Men and women can pray together. And when I heard that, I said, it'll never happen. Guess what? It never happened. And in fact, a couple of years, a year and a half ago, roughly, the Israeli government formally pulled out of that agreement. And that, along with other issues, is one of the reasons that Jews in America and Jews in Israel are barely talking to each other right now. All about a wall. Now, I'm all for the egalitarian prayer space. I want it to come into being. I want there to be such a thing. But I'm a little disappointed in the women of the wall that they have bought into this wall being that important. So if I come to that space, come to that wall, to that square in front of the wall, whether it's in the men's section or an egalitarian section, and all I think about is how much people are fighting over this thing, it takes away any possible holiness from me. I'm very grateful that we don't really know what hill in the Sinai is Mount Sinai, because it would give us one more thing to fight about. And we would. So I thought about that. If this is not a place of spiritual journey for me, what is? For me, talking about my own spiritual journeys, I don't need a place. We teach, Christianity teaches, Islam teaches that God is everywhere. Moses heard God's voice coming out of a very scraggly, lowly thorn bush on the slopes of Mount Sinai. Why did God speak out of such a lowly place? And believe me, there are plenty of those bushes there. It could have been any one of them. So there's nothing special about that one bush. Because if God can speak from there, God can speak from anywhere. The voice said to Moses, "Take off your shoes, you're standing on holy ground." What made the ground holy? The presence of God. Well, if God can be anywhere, then maybe we should all be going around barefoot all the time. So to me, I no longer think about any specific place for my spiritual journey. I can find God in a synagogue. I find God in a church. You may define God a little differently than they do here, but that's okay. I find God in a mosque. I find God in a forest. I find God on the beach. And if I can find God wherever I look, then the idea of finding God in a particular location or in a particular structure, to me becomes idolatry. It's about the place, it's not about God. So yeah, I still go there. I wish that in 1967, when Israel captured the old city from the Jordanians, and Moshe Dayan, who was the defense minister at the time, came to the wall like the same day or the day after it was captured by paratroopers, And he immediately turned over control of the wall to the chief rabbinate. And I can't help but thinking, God, I wish Moshe Dayan had turned it over to the Antiquities Authority instead. Then it doesn't pretend to be a holy site. It's an archaeological site. It's a historical site. There's no question about that. And if people want to pray there, they can pray. But it's become something else. There's a story that goes around in Jerusalem about a man who's been going to the Western Wall every day for 30 years to pray for peace. And the story is that a reporter finds out about this man, what he's been doing every day, 30 years. Wow. And the reporter goes and finds him and says to him, so what does it feel like after you've been praying here at the wall for 30 years for peace? And he looks at the reporter and says, you know, some days it feels like I'm praying to a wall. We don't pray to walls. We don't pray to hills. And we can find that one to whom we pray. We can make our spiritual journey anywhere we choose to open our eyes and see the presence of God. Thank you.
Now we'll open it up to questions. And there's mic stand there, mic stand here. And where's Jim Reed? He's going to take this mic. So if somebody needs to have the mic come to them, they can use this one. Would like to go first?
No questions? You're all ready for the quiz?
I'm struck by your reflections on the wall. Thank you very much. I'm wondering if you think that when we make a place like that sacred, that it makes other parts of the earth less sacred and feeds into sort of our lack of concern about that.
I think it does. I think that's right. You know, as I said, we can find God anywhere we look. God is just waiting for us to open our eyes and notice God's presence anywhere. And last month when Professor Tinker spoke, how many of you were here for that? Just, yeah, a lot of you. And he talked about the connection of the American Indians with the earth. I was amused earlier, Bill, you were talking about how, you know, he went on a pilgrimage and sat still for 3 days. He was waiting for the spirits to come and appear to him, and he said the only spirits that found him were the spirits of the ants, which I appreciated. But rather than picking one place that's sacred, if we remember that the whole earth is sacred, the whole earth was created by God. All of us of any of the Abrahamic religions study that all the time. In the Jewish world, where we begin reading a different portion each week, just a couple of weeks ago, we just read the creation story in the last couple of weeks. If God created it all, doesn't that make it all holy? And the way we've been treating this earth, it suggests that we think of it as anything but holy. But again, if God is everywhere, shouldn't we be taking care of anywhere that God might show up?
Is there a movement, for lack of a better term, other than the U.S., breaking with the Orthodox tradition, particularly pertaining to the equality of women and men?
Yes. Orthodoxy has actually become, relatively speaking, in the United States, one of the smaller movements, although they're growing quickly, if only because they tend to have bigger families than conservative and Reform Jews do. And that's true in Israel as well. And there are all kinds, not the subject of this evening, but there's all kinds of problems between the Orthodox and the non-religious Israelis. Most Israelis are not religious. They identify as Jews, but as ethnic Jews or as cultural Jews, not as religious Jews. But even in Israel, there are non-Orthodox movements that are moving away not only from separating men and women, but from looking at the body of the laws of the what we call mitzvot, the commandments in the Torah, and taking them less literally and more spiritually than the Orthodox often do. There are, and the more liberal branches, if we can call them that, of Judaism that are very strong in America, also have a very strong presence in Great Britain, in Latin America, in South Africa. So yes, it's Orthodoxy is not the largest stream of religious Judaism today. Unfortunately, they do have control of religious life for Jews in Israel. That was a political decision that was made just after the state was started in 1948. Unfortunately, because the good democratic socialists who were running the government at the time thought, as good democratic socialists, that the religion would wither away. And so they gave them some special privileges, and it was only a few hundred people at the time. Well, now it's 20% of the Jewish population. And so the men from that community don't serve in the army. They often don't work because they see study of Torah and Talmud as at least as important, probably more important. So many of those families are on welfare. And all of those things are bitterly resented by the non-Orthodox Jews in Israel. And so there's a big problem internally in Israel now between those two sectors of the population. But that's a subject for another night.
Not too long ago, I was speaking to a friendly, liberal American Jew that I thought I shared a lot of progressive values with, until we got onto the topic of Palestinians. And so you run into this.
Oh,
And-
yes.
Oh, there's something I don't understand here, because suddenly this kind, compassionate person kind of flipped and was telling me you cannot trust Palestinians, and just objectifying the whole people. So I'd like to know, when I run into that, what can I do? What approach can I take?
Change the subject. No. My good new friend, George, who will be speaking in just a moment, who is himself a Palestinian, a Christian from Bethlehem, he and I were talking earlier, and also I had him on my program a couple of weeks ago. Some of you may have heard it. We were hoping to avoid this topic, but I knew that inevitably it would come up. And I'll try to come up with a short answer, although I think that's an oxymoron, but it's too complicated a topic. Something happens to Jews who are politically progressive when you talk about American issues and you change the subject to Israel-Palestine. For Jews, it is an extremely emotional issue. We are still in living memory of the Holocaust. And many Jews, for sometimes good historical reasons that we don't have time to go into tonight, believe that Israel has to be there and has to be strong so that all Jews in the world have some place to go when the world turns against us again. We have a historical memory that nobody will protect us except us. I don't know if that's still true. I hope we never have to find out. But the Jews in Germany in the early 30s all said it can't happen here, and it happened. So when somebody says it can't happen here in America, I don't accept that as an answer. But there is this defensiveness, historical defensiveness, that Jews feel, including Israelis, and that, again, historical sense, part of it going back a few decades to when the PLO was a terrorist organization. There's can debate whether it still is, but today we still have Hamas and Hezbollah, which are terrorist organizations, which proclaim that they want to destroy the state of Israel. The problem with some of these Jews who are otherwise politically progressive is they would be the last people to want to be called racist or prejudiced against any particular group. But then you bring up Israel-Palestine, and logic goes out the window, and it becomes emotional. And my advice, you asked, what could you do? What can you say in that kind of a situation, other than change the subject? Maybe ask them why they feel that way. And maybe say something about, we can't judge an entire group by a few individuals who are terrorists. They're in the whole history of the Israeli-Arab and Israeli-Palestinian conflicts, there's no side is completely angelic, and no side is completely satanic. There are horns and halos enough to go around. And we all have to realize that if we're going to try to be logical about it. But as I say, for many American Jews, logic goes out the window when you bring up the topic. And so you can try to feel them out. Why do they feel that way? But in the end, you're not going to convince them right then, because it's so emotional. It's not rational. And eventually you're going to have to change the subject.
Well, I tried to argue that Israel, the Jews in Israel would be safer, and Israel would be a stronger country if the Israeli Palestinians and the Israeli Jews made peace with each other. That they would be much stronger.
And I absolutely agree with you. And over dinner earlier this evening, George and I made peace between Israel and Palestine. It's a done deal. No problem. What we did agree on was we could take the leaders from both sides, find a small island to put them on somewhere, and let them throw rocks at each other if they really want to. And if that happens, the people on the ground will make peace. They know how to live together. There is a significant portion of the Israeli population that agrees with you and me and George. Unfortunately, within the Israeli political situation, not enough of them. And I'm afraid that until your average Israeli voter wakes up to the necessity of change in the current political situation internally in Israel, and I think also until the Palestinian polity decides to finds a way to bring in and support a government that's a little more honest, there will be no peace. Because at the moment, the leadership on both sides don't want peace. They are politically, and more than politically, benefiting from the conflict.
And one last question right here.
Yes? Hi.
If we go back to pilgrimage and
Okay.
your personal story,
Thank you.
do you see any value,
Got
do you
both.
see any value personally of pilgrimage? And if so, what does a pilgrimage look like for you? And the other question I had is, are there any sites anymore that Jewish people go to besides the Western Wall?
I'll take the second part first. Yes, of course, there are many places that Jews who go from America, for example, to Israel go to as somewhat holy sites, not to the same extent as the Western Wall. There are 4 cities in the land of Israel that Jews have considered holy cities for the last couple of thousand years. Jerusalem, of course, Tiberias on the Sea of Galilee, Tzfat, or Safed in English, in the upper Galilee on top of a mountain, and Hebron on the West Bank, which is a subject I don't want to get into because it's part of the conflict issue. So Jews do go to those places. Orthodox Jews go to a number of places where very important, famous rabbis are buried. But no place is seen as holy as the Western Wall. Do I see a value to a physical, geographical pilgrimage? I do, because, but again, it doesn't have to be to any particular place. For me, I'm just talking about for me. Abraham was told by God to leave home. Go that way, I'll tell you when to stop, is basically what God said to Abraham. And eventually told him to stop in the land of Canaan. But in the Bible, over and over again, in different stories, even in the Christian Bible, when God wants somebody to really focus on their relationship with God, God instructs them to go out in the desert for a while, right? Happens to Abraham, happens to Moses, happens to Jesus, right? We need to find a way of getting past, shutting out all of those distractions of our daily lives that distract us from our relationship with God. And, you know, maybe a pilgrimage could just be to the seaside or to the forest. That can be a pilgrimage too. I think that if we go to what is considered holy sites, and you know, I know some people think that there are particular places on the globe that have an intrinsic holiness to them. I understand that. I don't accept that. It doesn't work for me. But human beings have endowed certain places with a sense of holiness because we've been going to them with a sense of holiness for centuries. And I think they take on some of that energy, including the Western Wall. But I think if we go to a place that we think of as holy, as long as we remember that it's not the place in and of itself that's where we're finding the holiness. It's a place that we've gone to leave us, to get away from all of those distractions of our regular daily lives. Then the pilgrimage serves the holy purpose that I think somebody sets out to achieve.
Thank you. Christian lives in Denver and Bethlehem. 300 years ago, Christian families began producing the handcrafts from olive wood, Bethlehem handcrafts of Denver. Only outlet is in the United States, and they shipped nationwide. Benaro's husband is a husband and father, born in Bethlehem, returns every summer to share in his family's artistry. He's well known for providing meaningful pilgrimages to the Holy Land. I'd like to introduce George Benaro.
Once again, my name is George Banura. I am a Palestinian Christian. that's my generation, go back to Christ's time, Christian from the Holy Land. My own family been carving the olive wood for 300 years in the city of Bethlehem. And we own a farm that's belonged to my dad. It has olive trees for over 800 years in the heart of the city of Bethlehem. So actually this is a picture for myself and my brother and my dad and my son and my nephews. When I was in their age, I learned my faith from carving the olive wood or by seeing my father and my uncles and my cousins carving the olive wood. Because we carve statues of Jesus, all his journey. We carve the nativity, we carve all the way, the stations of the cross, we carve most of the miracles that Jesus did. So by carving a piece or by watching them carving a piece, I understand the story more from my own family. This is actually where I start learning my faith. And I'm actually so proud of it. I go every summer to my hometown, but this summer I decided to take my family and myself to be as a program with actual pilgrimage. So we spent 10 days, just like the rest of the group, on a pilgrimage, just like a tourist in my hometown, my home country. So we went all over the places, all over the holy sites where Jesus was born, raised, did his miracle, crucified, died, all the places. And to us, every place in the earth is a holy land because this is God's creation. But to us as Christians, this is where Jesus spent his time, and it's so important for us when we read the Bible, apply it to the real physical places, just make it so easy and it's actually better as well. And next, please. This is my wife and I in the picture. And next slide, please. This is my family. This is my daughter. She's almost 14, and my son, he's almost 11. Jonathan and Julianne, and my wife Randa. And this picture actually in our home church in Bethlehem, in one of the baptisms. Next, please. Why I decided to take my family in a pilgrimage. My kid's born in America, here in the States. And they're going to a public school. So my background, I went to a Catholic school, and my wife and I went to a Catholic school. So there's no doubt if God exists. There's no technology, the way we raised, the technology is here. So I decided to take my kids. It's so important for them to understand their faith more and not to doubt about their faith. So strengthen in their faith is so important to us as a family. Like I said, it's not just because I'm Christian, and I'm so proud to be Christian that long, to Jesus himself. This is so important, and we are so honored for this. When I wake up in this world and I decide, okay, Jesus was born here. Okay, I born here too. So we are both from the same city. And if Jesus coming back, he will have the same ID that I have. He will call himself Palestinian, by the way. So it's because Bethlehem is part of Palestine. This is true. So in this picture, this is where Jesus spent his last night in a prison before the crucifixion. So in this place,
O Lord my God, by day I cry out, at night I clamor in your presence. Let my prayer come before you. Incline your ear to my call for help. For my soul is surfeited with troubles, and my life draws near to the netherworld. I am numbered with those who go down into the pit. I am a man without strength. My couch is among the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave, whom you remember no longer, and who are cut off from your care. You have plunged me into the bottom of the pit, into the dark abyss. Upon me your wrath lies heavy, and with all your billows you overwhelm me. You have taken my friends away from me. You have made me an abomination to them. I am imprisoned, and I cannot escape. My eyes have grown dim through affliction. Daily I call upon you, O Lord. To you I stretch out my hands. Will you work wonders for the dead? Will the shades arise to give you thanks? Do they declare your kindness in the grave, your faithfulness among those who have perished? Are your wonders made known in darkness, or your justice in the land of oblivion? But I, O Lord, cry out to you. With my morning prayer I wait upon you. Why, O Lord, do you reject me? Why hide me from your face? Am I afflicted and in agony from my youth? I am dazed with the burden of your dread. Your furies have swept over me. Your terrors have cut me off. They encompass me like water all the day. On all sides they close in upon me. Companion and neighbor you have taken from me. My only friend is darkness.
So after she finished, everybody cried. We are with 30 people in the small, tiny room. So we all cried afterward. The plays make a difference. And many people claim that they felt Jesus. They felt his heartbeats on the wall at that moment. And she was not prepared to read that passage. It was a hard passage. And she read it in a way, it made my whole trip worth it. The way she read it, and afterward, her body was shaking. There's a power in the Holy Land. And there's a power when we go and believe this is where this happened, even though sometimes the spot is maybe just off or not the same actual spot, but for us to apply it in the Bible, it means a lot to us as Christians. So, like I said, this is one of the powerful moments in the whole 10 days of pilgrimage when my daughter read this passage. And listening to her here, I mean, it's still in the church, but it's not the same that when you go and listen to that passage in that place. And this is actually applied in all the places we read a scripture from the Bible to that particular place when this event took place. So, next please. I asked myself why people going to the Holy Land and get to know the people more and more. So I found this is mostly, there's a few differences between people themselves. So some people go to understand the political situation more. Some people go to strengthen their faith more. Some people go to see the history of the place. Even non-religious people, but they just go for searching for history because we have a lot of history, and they're still discovering history in both Palestine and Israel. Next, please. I don't want to take a whole presentation. I want to just show you some holy places that I myself went with. So, and many people actually go asking for a miracle, and miracle happened. I have 3 trips that claimed a miracle happened in the actual trip in the Holy Land with the priest, and they, just people go and ask for a miracle, and it could happen, and we believe in that. A miracle can happen anytime. So. So, and of course, studying the Bible, we have, as Catholics and as priests, they go there to study the Bible really well. And we have so many organizations and colleges just for priests to take courses for a year or two, just to apply the Bible to the real places. And these are very, very difficult study that they provide in both Israel and Palestine as well. So, and many, like I said, many people go to check the political situation. It's so complicated. And even for me, I couldn't understand it. One thing I understand, the Jewish claim that they are the smartest people in the world, and the Palestinians claim they are the smartest people in the world. How come those two smart people cannot make peace together? So, again, we'll pray for peace. Peace and justice for everyone there. We have room to fit everybody. So why we just, life is too short. So why we just make peace and just live this life. And many people go to experience the culture. We have a lot of culture, history. We have, we as a Christian, the Islamic culture applied on us, and the Jewish culture applied on us as well. So, and it's beautiful culture. Hospitality in the Palestinians is the best you will ever think of. So, when people come to us, they don't know who is the Palestinian are. When they come and see and live with us, they love us. But when people don't know who we are, they just, from the media here, they hate the Palestinians. And the Palestinians are very friendly. And we actually, either Christians or Muslims, the majority want the peace. Also the Jewish, the majority want the peace. So I'm going to go over some slides with the holy sites very fast. And then this is the largest church in the Middle East, actually. It's huge. This is in Nazareth, the Basilica of the Annunciation. This is where the angel announced Mary that she's pregnant. And this is very close to the church. The walking distance is like 2-3 minutes. This is the St. Joseph Workshop in Nazareth as well. This is the Good Shepherd. This is less than a mile from my house. My house, it's very, very close to my home. This is where the angel came to the shepherds and announced the born of Jesus Christ. This is where Jesus was born. This is the little star. You can go down in the basement, and this is where the spot that they believe Jesus was actually born. This is the Church of the Nativity from outside, the big picture. Cana. This is where the first miracle happened. And people come from all over the world to renew their vows. I have my wife and I did ours in June. It happened to be our 18th anniversary in June. And I told her, are you going to do the same mistake? She said, yes. so next please. This is Ein Karim. This is where John the Baptist was born. Beautiful place there, beautiful church. This is Mount of Olives. You can easily stand on Mount of Olives and see the other side of Jerusalem, where he had the Wailing Wall and Western Wall. You can easily see it from there. Beautiful place. And this is the Dome of the Ascension. This is the last footprint of Jesus on earth. Beautiful, amazing place. This is where Jesus taught the apostles the Lord's Prayer. This is the only prayer that Jesus taught us to pray, and took in that place. And you can read it in all the languages in the world. This is where Jesus cried in Jerusalem. And when he said to Jerusalem, there's no rock will be on top of rock, the destroyer of Jerusalem. This is the Garden of Gethsemane where Jesus prayed on the rock. Beautiful basilica from outside. This is where Jesus prayed before he was arrested. This is Villa de Rosa. It's a big place in Jerusalem where we walk, we carry the cross, and we walk where Jesus has walked before his crucifixion when he carried the cross. This is the Holy Sepulchre. For us, this is the most holy place in the world. This is where Jesus put his dead body in, where he was buried, and when he rose from death. It is a beautiful church. This is from this picture from outside and this picture from inside, but it's a really big church divided in 5 different churches. How many have been to that church? Beautiful. When I enter the church, every time I enter the church, my whole body will shake. I don't know if it happened to you or not. This is a really powerful place to be in. This is the baptism site. This is the Jordan River. This is where they believe Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. We'll finish it. This is the Tabgha, and this is the Mount of Tabor. This is the upper room, but it's hard to predict where the Last Supper took place. They're guessing that place. This is one of the places that they wasn't sure if this is the actual place where the Last Supper took place. This is the Sea of Galilee. I said in the past, I was shocked to see 70% of our faith took place in the Sea of Galilee. So many beautiful miracles and teaching of Jesus took place in the Sea of Galilee. And this is where we have so many churches around the Sea of Galilee. It's a powerful place too. Just would like to share with you some food, if you're familiar with the Palestinian food. This is the za'atar, this is the mankushe. This is bread with olive oil, and on top of the olive oil we put some za'atar. And we have some, this is the grape leaves, the warak dawali. I don't know if you have already tasted. This is the kebab and the shish kebab with the tabbouleh, falafel and the hummus and the tabbouleh as well. This is the Arabic coffee, strong coffee. This is the most famous sweet in the Middle East called kinafa. It's cheese from inside. This is the baklava, also very famous. And in the Sea of Galilee, we had ate this fish, the St. Peter fish. Very famous restaurants are there. And I guess thank you so much. I'd like to open it more for questions, because I'm better at answering the question than doing a lecture. This is my first lecture ever. So thank you.
So, questions?
And please don't hesitate any question. I'm very much open to any question. I don't take it personally.
Well, I'll start. So the Palestinians, what percentage are Christians?
We are 1% of the entire region are Christians. So that's Israel and Palestine. Only 1% Christians left in the whole region there. Okay.
And how does that play as to lack of power or whatever?
Yes, we have actually, unfortunately, we have no power. So we are about 160,000 Christian members all over the, again, Palestine and Israel. So it's not easy on us to be minority, but we are powerful, I mean, by faith. So
So George,
yeah.
I'm wondering if you could describe a little bit, perhaps from having talked to people who did pilgrimages to the holy sites in Israel, what it might be like for you versus someone who doesn't have quite the close association that you do. Do you think that that makes a difference in terms of going there to the holy sites?
With all the respect with companies are there, most of the companies, they treat people with numbers. So we have 20 people in that group and we have 40 people in that group. We take it more of family. So every group that we taking, my own family actually welcome them, and we have dinner at my house there. We show them the factory where we carve the olive wood. And if there's any special need, any emergency happened, we take it as a family members. One of the ladies, she has a headache, a migraine headache, and she couldn't continue in one of the groups. And she called us up and she want to leave, come back to the States. I told her to stay with my own family for 2 days until she feel well, and then she continue in the group. So we taking groups, not numbers, taking groups as a family. Always would like to show them, of course, the holy sites, the places, and our culture, our life. We do masses with family, with actual community, and in services and masses with actual community in the Holy Land. So it's more personal than it is as a company or you know what I mean, just numbers of people.
So for you as a Palestinian, it's more because it's your home and your history.
Exactly.
And so someone like myself coming wouldn't quite have that familiarity with that.
Yes. But like I said, most of the people who went with other companies, they love it, again, because of the holy places and the places. It will be a little plus with us just to show them more. And, like I said, it's the food that we have, it's magnificent. And unfortunately, some people go to the 10-day tours, and they will never ever experience the food, the local food. They have just fancy restaurants and just serving a normal breakfast, just like here or anywhere in Europe.
So George, you've spoken mostly from the Catholic perspective, but are there other groups of Christians?
Oh yeah.
And could you give us a little sense
Oh yeah,
of
absolutely.
the wide
Just
diversity that might be there?
So, I mean, everybody is welcome, and we do pilgrimage with Lutherans and Episcopal and Catholics. But the majority of the Catholics, this is where our church, my groups are. But we do all over denominations. Yeah.
And certainly other Christians claim that same
Yes, exactly. Oh yeah.
part of their traditions. But I'm wondering, are there people maybe from outside of Christianity who also come and find these lands special?
Like I said, some people come to see the history of the places, and in one of the groups we have one person. He's not even religious. He just came to listen and to see the historical places. Been there for 3,500 years. So this is how much history we have. But like I said, what we are doing is just showing our faith to others. So, most of the churches that sign up with us here are Catholics, but that doesn't mean that we do more than Catholics. We do other churches as well.
So I'm wondering, those other traditions that do come besides Catholicism, and perhaps those who don't share the Christian perspective, do you see any effect in their lives from that experience?
I have no experience of this, so I don't know the answer, to be honest.
Maybe there's somebody in the community here that has something that they could share.
But absolutely, the places are open for everybody,
Sure.
not just for
Right.
Christian or non-Christian. So we had, in fact, in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, in this group, I saw at least 20 women, Muslim women, inside the church, visiting the church. And they light candles as well. They light candles inside the churches. So
Certainly many of the traditions, faith traditions, share some similarities because we all share that Christian experience, but also the Jewish tradition we share as holy spots, as does the Islamic tradition. So
So-
I can understand why those Muslim women would perhaps be
Absolutely.
there.
When he started talking about his presentation, I told myself, our Lord himself was a Jewish. And he actually was raised as a Jewish.
Right.
He was presented in the temple as a Jewish. So this is, Old Testament, we still have in the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament. So we strongly believe that our roots come from the Jewish. And also, I tell you about Islam, they have, if you don't know, that Mary, the Blessed Mother, has a whole chapter of Al-Quran. This is the only woman has a chapter on her name in the Quran. And I know Muslims, neighbors, they have her picture, a big picture, inside their houses. So they heavily, strongly believe in the Blessed Mother. It wasn't in the slides. We have a place very close to the Church of the Nativity called the Milk Grotto. It's a little church they believe that Mary was breastfeeding the Lord at that place. So the entire place turned to be milk. Up to now, we can go and taste the grotto as a milk. There's a room behind the church. It's a big room. It's filled with pictures of babies. So from all over the Middle East, people come, ask the Blessed Mother for a miracle, especially for the people who they don't bring children. And when they have children, they send a picture, and they proved that's Mary helped them getting the baby. So the whole room filled with pictures, and 95% of the pictures are Muslims. So they heavily believed in the Blessed Mother.
I just wanted to say that what surprised me when I went there was all the areas within the Palestinian territory. U.S. aid or the U.S. government via USAID, was putting a lot of money into giving the Palestinians money to redo these sites because over time they needed restoration. And what really I thought was unique was they would say on it being something to the effect restored, donations by the PLL or the Palestinian Authority, by the PA, with funds provided by USAID. And that struck me as kind of nice in a way, giving credit for the way the money is actually flowing. But I was curious, you said you're Catholic. As I understand, there's a sect in that area that is part of the Catholic Church, but has various differences, like the priest can marry. And are you from that sect?
So in the Catholic, we have Malachite Catholics. Those are the ones the priest can get married before his ordination. And this is what we call it the Eastern Catholic. They still belong to Rome, but again, the priest can get married. And the Greek Orthodox, which is the majority, also the priest can get married. So only the Roman Catholic, the priest cannot get married.
So which sect are you?
I'm actually half Roman Catholic and half Greek Orthodox. So I actually was baptized in a Greek Orthodox church. When you baptize in the Greek Orthodox Church, you get your baptism, confirmation, First Communion at the same time. And I went to Catholic school as well, and I get my First Communion and confirmation at the Catholic Church. So this is actually very common in Palestine, very, very common. When you are 1% of the population, you don't ask yourself who you are. We always announce ourselves or address ourselves as a Christians. That's all. We share. We go to services a lot. We receive communion. I receive communion in the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church as well.
How has the wall, the barriers that have been built, affected you?
I don't want to touch on the political part because I go back home every year. I think we are we're in 2018, and with this human rights and with this what the humans have reached, we don't want walls. We don't want peace. We want, if there's a wall exists, we want to destroy walls between people, and that's actually not just me. This is everybody. It's just affect everybody. Imagine that there's a wall here. As a neighbors, they can't talk to each other, and we share the same blood, either Christians or Jewish or Muslims. If you have three people stand up next to each other, you can't tell the difference who's Muslim or who's Christians or who's Jewish. We share the same blood. But why there's borders and why there's walls in the same country? Again, if Jesus come back again here in Bethlehem, he cannot go to Jerusalem. He has to have a permission to go to Jerusalem. This is like 5-6 miles away. You can walk from Bethlehem to Jerusalem, but you have to have a permission to leave your hometown. Again, we should have peace. This is the only solution for not just the Holy Land, not just between the Israelis and the Palestinians. If this peace happened, the peace in the whole Middle East will take place. This is what I think we should have. I mean, if peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians happened, there would be a peace in the entire Middle East because it's all connected. Yes.
First, thank you so much, George and Rabbi, for sharing. Really appreciate hearing your perspectives. And you've both kind of touched on this piece a little bit, but these three religions and being Abrahamic faiths and having these similarities, is there a common belief kind of among the community there that all three faiths are praying to the same God? Is there that kind of unity as well of like we all believe in the same God?
For sure, yes.
We'll put them both up here.
Yeah, we all believe that we're sharing the same God.
Very definitely. There's actually a quote from the Quran, from Islam, that I like to bring up at moments like this, where God says to humanity, I could have made you all alike, but I chose not to, so that you could learn from one another. And then a little bit later on, it's as if the thought is being continued. But if you must compete, thereby showing how well God knows us, compete in good works. We're not so different. Well, I was thinking, as George was saying, line us all up, you can't tell the difference. It's true, we're all related, but who do you fight with more than family?
That's true. That's true.
But even after you fight with family, you come back because that love is still there at the basis of everything. That's what we're missing right now. The love is there, but there's a question about the wall that's separating Israel and Palestine. I think there need to be walls, but not that high. How about that high? That way we can each maintain our own identities and still talk over the wall to learn from each other.
So I have Muslim friends, I have a lot of them. I have Jewish friends, and I have Christians friends. And when we talk, we laugh at the situation. This is a joke. Again, it's easy to make peace if they sit together and make peace, but they don't listen to each other. And everybody, the majority, want peace. So unfortunately, this few people benefit from not having peace there. So if they ask you the question again about the Palestinians, what's going to be your answer?
What question would you like to ask each other?
Oh, that's a hard one. I never thought about it.
Hillel, why don't you go first?
Make it easy on me.
When are you inviting us for dinner?
Oh. Anytime.
That food, I mean, you know, when I had George at the radio station a few weeks ago to put on my program, after the program, he was, you know, I mentioned next time I'm in Denver, I have to go over to his store, because he mentioned to me that they also now have some Jewish things carved out of olive wood. So I got to go see what these are. And he said, yeah, we'll invite you over for dinner. And we've this lamb that we make, you know, in the Palestinian way. I said, George, I'm sorry, we're both vegetarians. He was so disappointed, but then he said, but his wife makes the best falafel in America.
Yeah, indeed.
So we're on our way.
So how many are Christians here? Okay, I'm going to ask you one question then to the audience. Why only Christians love their mother-in-laws? See, just testing your faith. You have to be Palestinian Christian to answer that question. Any guess? Just do your best. You know the answer?
I don't.
So Jesus taught us to love our enemies.
You know, we're all wondering, you know, when there will be peace. And, I mean, you know, George and I have already figured it out. If only they'd listened to us. But I was telling him over dinner earlier. Some years ago, I heard a talk by a retired American diplomat who had spent much of his career in the Middle East. And he started off his talk with the following story. That there had been, you know, in the recent past at that point, there had been a couple of possible peace proposals put on the table. Frankly, one of them really would take a miracle, right? The other one maybe had some possibilities. So one of them is if we can get Moses and Jesus and Muhammad to all come to Jerusalem and tell their followers to chill out and get along, that's the one that has some possibility, because expecting the Israelis and the Palestinians to make peace on their own, that would take a miracle. But in the Jewish tradition, miracles happen every day. We have a prayer in our liturgy in which we thank God for the miracles that are daily with us morning, noon, and night. Miracles are not what a lot of people think, like in the Bible, where it seems that God momentarily suspends the laws of physics in order to achieve a certain result. The miracles are when we work with each other as partners with God in making this a better world for all of us. That's the real miracle. And we can do it. And we do it. And people are doing it on the ground in the Middle East. There are many organizations, unfortunately not enough people, but many organizations of Palestinians and Israelis who are working together, just doing whatever they normally would do, but doing it together. They play soccer, they play music, there are two organizations. As long as we're on the topic, I've got the microphone, I'm going to do a little plug here. There are two organizations that I send a little money to every now and then that just amaze me in the fact that they are doing what they are doing to try to achieve peace. There's a group called Combatants for Peace. This is made up of Palestinians and Israelis who have all, at one time or another, been part of the conflict. Their website says, "We only used to see each other through the sights of our rifles. And we've chosen to put down our rifles and fight for peace." If that doesn't give you goosebumps, try the next one. It's an organization of Israeli families and Palestinian families who have lost someone to the conflict. They meet together, They break bread together, they pray together. Once a year, they hold a memorial service together for all of those that they have lost. And they tell everybody else in the Middle East, we don't want you to join our organization because we don't want you to qualify by losing someone. Let my loss be the last. They say that right outside, right out front, right out loud. And I'm getting goosebumps right now every time I talk about it. And those two organizations in particular, out of more than 100 others, if those people can work together for peace, I don't think anybody else has any excuse.
Thank you very much. Linda.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, George and Hillel. Let's give him another round of applause. Well, we hope to see you at our next event, which is Stories of Spiritual Journey, Destinations in Islamic and Buddhist Traditions, November 8th, right here in Trinity at 6:30. That's our next one. And if you haven't, if you're new and you didn't receive a brochure, there's brochures out there on the table to your right as you leave, and get a brochure. It'll give you all of the events in the future. And one in particular I wanted to point out is that in January, we'll have a program on the moral growth toward care of the other in Jewish and Christian traditions. And Sophia Shore will be from the first group that Hillel mentioned. So that will be a very interesting topic to continue the discussion we had a little bit of tonight. And if you haven't already visited the information or the donation table, sign up for our newsletter and we'll send you emails about when our events are going to be. Or you could sign up to be a volunteer. We always appreciate volunteers, definitely. And then when you came in, when you came in through the door, you got an evaluation sheet, and we're very interested in your comments. So if you could take a few minutes to complete one of those. As in past events, we'll do a drawing for anyone who turns in an evaluation tonight or who uses the URL on that evaluation sheet to send us their thoughts by tomorrow, within 24 hours. We'll draw one of the evaluations out and we'll give you a $25 gift certificate to the Union, the new restaurant downtown. Thank you and good night. Whoops.
Can you put that one up of Shaquille and Clark? I just want to remind everybody, because I mentioned before, that Al does his program on Tuesdays at 6:30. So prior to that one coming up, he'll be interviewing both Clark Warren and Shaquille Muhammad. And we'll try to get a notice out to you, usually about a week ahead, something like that. Thank you. Thank you for coming.